We've had a couple of throwdowns, starting with Darius, who basically said, we're on a moonshot, and he based it on experience at USAA, but I think in the process of saying what USAA had to do, we sort of had a superset of what each and every one of us has to do or support as we think about providing intelligent assistance, overlaying it with intelligent authentication, and providing a better digital experience in real time. So that's what we're going towards. But I chose these three folks to sort of give sort of a parting shot, largest takeaway, and a challenge of your own. Let's start with Martin. And I'm taking notes from here on.
You're taking notes from now on. I think this is a kind of technology that is suddenly gone into very rapid overdrive. If you go and talk to quite a lot of the vendors just down the corridor, they've all got at least 5, maybe 10 years worth of track record. This is not new in one sense, and it's interesting that it's all new, and everyone's getting overexcited, and the press is, spilling digital ink on it at the moment, and all the rest of it. So, I think one of the takeaways for me is, if I was buying this stuff, is trying to work out what's real and what's not yet real, what it can do and what it can't do. I think personally that it has pretty good upside in terms of taking a significant amount of what was live traffic in our customer service environment and delivering that in a self-service context. Now, because that has always been difficult to achieve, I think that's probably, for me, the kind of message that I would walk away with, and it's certainly the message that I'm putting out to people in the contact center space, that it is now absolutely possible to do that. And the degree of that transformation, which is somewhere bottom side 15%, I don't know, top side might even nudge over 50.
Wait, what's the numerator and what's the denominator in that?
God, I'm not that clever, but
we just had the pre-penultimate, no, that's the pre-penultimate speaker.
Yes.
15% of what?
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, of live. I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that, the amount that we can actually chip away, which was previously going to be delivered through live assistance, whether over voice or text, can now be delivered to that. Probably it will vary by use case and by sector. But even 15% makes a heck of a difference in terms of headcount, and if it's above 50, well, that's transformational. So, if you looked forward and said, what might my call center operation look like in 3 years once we've put this in place, users pick up the habit, we pick up the journey as well. I think that was a point made yesterday, that it's iterative, and it's getting smarter at the same time. I think we end up with a profoundly different operating model for a contact center. Now, I've just taken one big use case out of all the things that we've talked in the next 2 days. So that, for me, is a really exciting piece of news to take back to the ranch. And there's enough evidence already next door that there's the ground, the basis of believing that that's all credible, spread across a bunch of sectors. And I think that's a really good news story and an exciting one.
Just some assembly required.
Indeed.
Okay. Matt.
I guess so. That's probably two, if I may. So one is kind of
we'll charge extra.
It's kind of really exciting. I'm following on a bit from Maurice's presentation. Some really exciting times. I think kind of banks are stepping up the mark in the UK. Certainly, I'd expect most banking customers in the UK to be in scope of some enhanced security mechanisms on the phone within the next 18 months. Nearly everyone. But that is only step one, yeah. So there's like it's the start of a transition to a different way of thinking about the problem, and I think there's a bit of a actually how do we move from kind of our mechanism of authentication to really intelligent authentication and take both things we know not to be true, not bad stuff, and the positive stuff and the negative stuff, and all of the other information we have, and make kind of the right decisions at the right time. And I don't necessarily see kind of I see enterprises having to put that together themselves, and it'd be quite kind of hard with all the tools being provided us today. I think then the second one with my other hat on, which has nothing to do with authentication at all, which is kind of one of the challenges that I've also been spending a lot of time on is which is really, it's following on from Geraldine and Darius as well. It's kind of really quite in the UK we have a fundamental issue with people's savings, long-term financial planning and savings for retirement. And it's an incredibly hard behavioural issue to deal with. And I think there's a few like that floating around that once we can drive some cost savings and make our organisations slightly more efficient, but there are actually some kind of socially quite important things that we could be doing with this technology as well. To Darius's point, like there's this pride thing, and people don't actually they need a conversation with a human being, but that's not where they start some of these things. And if we can deploy some of this technology in those more kind of complex use cases, which is kind of net new demand in many cases rather than saving, then I think that would be a really exciting use of this technology.
Yeah. I mean, the way that's been articulated in the past, and it keeps ringing true, is that there's some hard dollar savings and things that you bake into a business plan to bring the new technology into the workflow and business processes. And then you start this mission of discovery or iteration that you called it, where there's areas where we as individuals would prefer self-service to carry out our business. And you know, with the generation that's really used to online gaming and stuff like that, not gambling, but you know, it just makes perfect sense that they'll discover it and define how they're going to be used. So. Score 2, Brett.
So Dan, I think my biggest takeaway is just the fundamental the premise of this conference was combining intelligent authentication and intelligent assistance. And I think if there was anybody in the room that was scratching their head and thinking, why are these two topics together? That I'm hopeful that throughout this journey, these 2 days, that has become apparent. And I actually think that in the future we should potentially combine those two tracks into one.
I would like to keep everyone in the same room.
Because I think that as systems,
with your consent,
as systems become more intelligent, right, the opportunity for risk also increases, right? And so we talked about,
was just saying.
In the authentication track, right, there was a whole conversation about the Internet of Things and having refrigerators, order, produce and having all sorts of devices, cars and so forth, do all sorts of amazing things for us. And that's a wonderful premise. The issue is that if you, as we saw in the last session, right, if fraudsters manage to tap into that, then we've also created an immense problem. And so I do think that as organizations, as enterprises, deploy these intelligent systems, they do need to think about security. And I'm just, thrilled that USA and other organizations that have presented over the last 2 days have communicated that message. And so hopefully that came across. And the last thing I wanted to quickly comment on was, I like the moonshot analogy, but it can be scary as well, right? Because,
right.
Getting a man on the moon costs a lot of money.
Well, what's interesting is it's something they did in the 60s that we can't do now. I mean, what?
Just get just get billions and billions of dollars and thousands of people to work on a single problem. And I think that, combining, these interesting technologies on the authentication side and on the intelligent assistance side is not that hard. Yes, that it is hard. We heard in the earlier panel that things need to be integrated and there are multiple systems. So it's, I don't want to make it sound that it's, just a walk in the park, but at the same time, it's not as hard as putting a man on the moon, because we saw USA was able to pull it off.
Exactly. I mean, there's two contradicting ways of seeing what's going on, and if you don't give it much thought, you think this is just way out there, and then to come to a place like this and hear the use cases and see the use cases, you realize that we're farther along than you generally acknowledge in the customer experience community, in the security community. It's amazing.
I was really fascinated by the Atos Capgemini session as well, and that, some of that systems integration stuff took me back, and it's tough,
We all are learning COBOL again.
That's
this is
right.
Perfect.
Enterprise buses and all that good middleware and all that kind of jazz. But the notion of putting this interface at the front end and is, in a sense, redeeming, legacy and making it accessible to people. I thought that was a really interesting and compelling vision as well. So interesting, the audience, there's multiple stakeholders that can benefit from this approach.
Because we were articulating it as IA is the way that we consume AI, that intelligent assistance is how we consume artificial intelligence, but it's also how we consume every single legacy technology that's out there and been wrapped in something and has an API for something else, and it's
because otherwise, and there's a really important point, otherwise you end up with a parallel universe. You get this digital version of
just
life.
one?
Just one. But it never gets integrated back in then to what you've actually got, because there's a ton of people that are never going to walk away from legacy.
Right.
You're never going to get telco walking away from billing systems. You never get people walking away from that back end stuff. And this suddenly provides a way of accessing it in a modern context.
Yeah, that brings it home. Testify other people's takeaways. And do I have to name your name? No. Yes, over here. Oh wait, we'll get there.
So, going back to what Martin was saying, I thought my big takeaway from the previous session, whatever it was pre-Ultima at my education,
Pre-penultimate.
yes, indeed, was something that Lee said that I've got a bit of experience of, which is put the intelligent assistant behind the agent as a support piece, and they will become more familiar with it. So I've just done a piece of work for a bank, and what we suggested is they use it on the internal help desk. That will help them get used to it, that will help them deploy it, and that will help them move it forward. And they've now gone in 3 months to a point where they're saying, should we actually add a sense of humour now and create some gamification? And it's, start small, and the applications will develop themselves. And I was tremendously interested with what Lee said about that, because that's the logical thing to do. Spend the money supporting your front line, and then try to replace the front line as you go in some areas, but don't start out trying to replace the front line as being your first goal.
Right. And we've heard that in spades in the marketplace, that when we term this as covering intelligent assistance, and people's brains jump to avatars and lifelike this and that, and they think, that's not what I want to do. But at the same time, we're seeing the resources that support natural language understanding, machine learning, knowledge management, stuff that they've already invested in, and just think of it as it's
a consolidation in some respects of some investment, isn't it?
There's that to it, and then the way it's presented, it's like the son of Screen Pop. It's the new Screen Pop could be this very live. This is your next best answer, and you tell me if you like it or not. And,
And just to build on that point, sometimes these things happen without them being designed.
Absolutely.
And it just made me think about the virtual assistant deployment at Jetstar, which we heard about at a previous Opus conference.
At our intelligent assistant
I've been to a lot of Opus conferences, as you guys can tell, and how the system, the virtual assistant, was designed right for customers, and it definitely served a purpose there. But the organization quickly realized that the customer care agents were using it as well, and that it actually simplified their job. Yeah. And so a very unexpected and an unplanned outcome. But I think it showcases that these intelligent assistants have a role that goes far beyond just front-ending a website or front-ending a mobile app. Absolutely.
I think also it kind of suits our psychology. I've got an app at the moment which is Quartz, which is just another way of serving up journalist stuff.
Right.
And it's very simple. It's just kind of different stories, and it says at the end of it, do you want more of that, or shall I serve you up something new? And it kind of works in rather the same way that visual IVR works, if you've seen that yet.
Yeah.
Which completely makes IVR suddenly work and makes you realise that it's always been stuck in the wrong format called audio. But when somebody can see it and choose and move to the next place on a smartphone, it kind of just satisfies our human need, doesn't it? You can stay in control, but it's highly relevant. And I think, you've used this word for ages now, conversational, ways of approaching
Somebody
stuff.
made that the name of their company, so I'm enjoined from bringing it up. No.
Well, I'll do it on your behalf. But I think that also works. It works for us at a human level, this way of dealing with stuff, and it's just enough to make us engage with the relevant amount of knowledge. So I think it's hit on a psychology that's going to make it popular as well.
And it will happen in increments. And we can't shock people, and we have to be responsive to what they're doing.
Yeah.
But, my takeaway was that we also anticipate that people's behavior changes really quickly once they detect the benefit of the new way of doing it.
Yeah,
and
pick it up and get on with it.
Right. So, anybody else with positive closing remarks, or can we?
I'll go ahead and say something.
Yay, Derek.
I found actually, I thought Swedbank's presentation was very interesting, and what I found fascinating was talking about the external use of it and the internal use of it, and what is expected from the customers and how they respond to an intelligent assistant versus what agents and internal employees think about it. And there's slang, there's other colloquialisms that are not necessarily used in the conversation with customers, and so it kind of ties to this idea of there's multiple applications for intelligent assistants. It isn't just a simple travel assistant or a Siri or customer care even. It's help desk. It's HR, changing your plan within your organization, where it's also helping business processes that obviously which Capgemini and Atos too. So to me, it shows an extension of applications that I just didn't expect. But of course, it's not just a one size fits all. In Swedbank's case, it does require some understanding, some learning, and ultimately kind of perfection of that intelligent assistant. So I think that's, again, we're still at the emerging beginning stages, but it shows there's a lot out there.
Yeah, I think people are leaving the room so they don't have to answer this question. So, and also the clock on the wall says it's 4:30 when we were scheduled to end, and everybody's been great to stay this long. I always learn a lot at our conferences, and I want to thank everybody that's presented, everybody that's attended, and hope we keep this conversation going on forever. But anyway, thank you very much.